She thinks she can get all the good things of life. Never.
As long as I am here, she will never be happy in this life.
They say jealousy is a fire. It does not announce itself. It does not knock on your door and say, I have come for you. No, it creeps in slowly, quietly, wearing the face of friendship, hiding behind hugs and laughter and sisterhood. And by the time you smell the smoke, your whole life is already burning. My name is Angela, and for a very long time, I did not know that the people sitting closest to me at the table were the ones who had been feeding that fire all along. I grew up in Lagos, a regular girl from a regular compound house, where the smell of fried plantain filled the corridors every Sunday morning, and the sound of your neighbor's quarrel was just background music to life. My mother sold fabric at the market. My father fixed generator engines until his hands cracked and his back gave out. We were not rich, but we were not broken either. And somehow, through all of it, I carried myself with a quiet dignity that my mother said came from God and not from circumstance. By the time I was 24, I had built something small but solid. A decent job at a media company in Lagos Island, a one-room apartment in Surulere with a window that caught the morning breeze, and 4 friends I would have given my last meal for: Chika, Tolu, and Ifi. We had known each other since university. We shared everything: pepper soup after late-night lectures, tears after bad heartbreaks, bus fare when nobody had money. I loved those women the way you love family, without conditions, without calculation, with my whole chest. I thought they loved me the same way. I was a fool. See, there is something that happens when a woman carries a certain kind of light, not the kind that comes from expensive makeup or designer clothing. I mean the kind that lives inside you. The kind that makes a room shift when you walk in, not because you are trying, but because something in you draws people near without permission. I had that. I was never proud of it. I never used it like a weapon. I simply existed, and people, especially men, were drawn to me the way moths are drawn to a lantern in the dark. Wealthy men, educated men, men who drove cars with tinted windows and spoke with the kind of confidence that came from actually having options. They would find me at events, at work functions, at the market even. And every single time one of them looked at me, really looked, I would later discover something ugly had already begun stirring in the hearts of my 3 closest friends. I did not see it, not yet. It started with small things, quiet things, things I brushed off like dust on my shoulder. There was Emeka, a man I had met at a corporate event. Warm, focused, the kind of man who remembered what you said 3 conversations ago. We spoke on the phone for 3 weeks straight. Then one day he sent me a message that made my stomach drop. Emeka, Jella, I think we should slow things down. I heard some things from your friend. I don't think you are who I thought you were. I stared at my phone screen until the words blurred. My chest tightened. Something cold moved through me. I called Chika that same night. What did you tell Emeka about me? She laughed, that easy, unbothered laugh of hers. Angela, relax. I only told him you are always busy with work. I was just being honest. Stop overthinking everything. I believed her, because that is what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt, even when the doubt is screaming. But Emeka never called again. Then the next man disappeared, and the one after that. Each time I searched myself, the way you search an empty room when you have lost something precious. I picked myself apart. Was I too serious? Too expressive? Too much? I began to shrink myself before men even had the chance to leave. I started bracing for the ending before the story even began. I stopped trusting my own heart. And through every heartbreak, Chika, Tolu, and Ifi were right there. Warm arms, steady voices. Angela, those men did not deserve you. A woman like you is too much for ordinary men to handle. Your person is coming. I held on to those words like medicine. I did not know they were the ones poisoning the well.
There is a proverb that the old women in my mother's village used to say.
The snake that bites you hardest is usually the one that warmed itself beside your fire. I had heard that proverb my entire life. I repeated it at school. I smiled when elders said it. I never, not once, imagined that it would become the summary of my own story. Let me tell you who these women really were beneath the surface. Chika was the loud one, the bold one, the first to speak in any room, and the last to back down from any argument. She had her own beauty, full lips, a wide, infectious smile, a figure that turned heads on any street. Men liked Chika, but they always seemed to like me more. And that one fact, that one small, involuntary fact, had lodged itself inside her like a thorn she could never fully remove. Chika's game was interception. Every man who came close to me, she found a way to slide into the gap. She would appear at the exact moment the conversation was warmest, touching arms, laughing at the right time, making herself unforgettable. And then, when she had enough of their attention, she would speak. Quietly, casually, the way you mention something you are trying not to make a big deal of. Angela is sweet, but between you and me, she is not really the relationship type. Too many guys around her, you know how it is. I love my girl Angela, but she's still carrying her ex around. I would not invest too much if I were you. Small seeds dropped into willing ears, and men, being men, would water those seeds with their own insecurities until the seeds grew into reasons to walk away. And then there was Ify, soft, gentle-faced Ify, who always knew what to say and when to say it. The one I trusted the most, if I am being honest with myself. She had this warmth about her, the kind that made you feel safe enough to be completely honest. And I was. I told Ify things I told nobody else. The fears I carried at 3 in the morning, the soft underbelly of every heartbreak, the moment where I felt small and unworthy. I gave her all of it, freely, the way you give precious things only to people you trust with your life. Ify filed every single one of those confessions away like ammunition. When she needed to destroy a connection I was building, she would retrieve exactly the right piece of information, polish it, reshape it, and present it as proof that something was wrong with me. I once told her during a hard season that I sometimes felt like love always slipped through my fingers, no matter how carefully I held it. Just a passing feeling, the kind of raw honesty that belongs between real friends. 3 months after that conversation, a man I had been seeing, a calm, decent man named Segun, who made me laugh more than I had laughed in years, called me with a voice that had gone cold. Ify told me, "You said you are only with me because you are lonely, that you don't even really like me, that you are just passing time." I sat down on my kitchen floor when he said that, my back against the cold tiles, my phone pressed to my ear. I did not cry. I just felt hollowed out, like something had reached inside my chest and scraped everything clean. And Tolu, quiet, measured Tolu, who was perhaps the most dangerous of all 3, because she operated completely in the shadows. Tolu never told obvious lies. She was far too calculated for that. She worked with circumstances. She arranged situations the way a chess player moves pieces. She would ensure I arrived somewhere looking rushed or flustered. She would pass on information that was almost correct, a time slightly wrong, a detail shifted so that I would appear unreliable, confused, difficult. She constructed versions of me that I would never recognize in a mirror, using only the furniture of real life. She once said to a man who had been pursuing me with genuine intention, "Angela is a good person. Just be patient with her. She can be a little much when she feels insecure." She said it with care in her voice. She said it like a concerned friend looking out for him. And from that day forward, every time I was simply being myself, animated, expressive, full, he stood it against me. He saw too much. He saw insecure. He started measuring his words around me. Then he measured his steps. Then he was gone. Year after year, man after man, each one arriving like morning, each one leaving like smoke. And me, always the same, always searching, always finding the flaw in myself, growing quieter, growing smaller. I started wearing my personality like a coat I was afraid to fully put on. I second-guessed every text before I sent it. I rehearsed conversations in my head to make sure I would not be too much. I stopped being Angela and started being a careful, shrinking version of her. By 28, I had nearly stopped hoping. I had begun to make peace with the idea that love was simply not something that was going to stay in my hands. Some people, I told myself, are just not meant for that kind of happiness. Maybe I was one of those people. And every time I fell apart, Chika and Tolu and Ifi were there, warm, present, faithful, saying all the right things. And then going home to a group chat I did not know existed, where they laughed about the very pain they had created. I was not the problem. I was the target. And the worst thing they would ever do to me had not even happened yet. His name was David Ose. And from the moment he came into my life, something in me, that quiet, wounded, carefully guarded part of me began, very slowly, to uncurl. He was Ghanaian Nigerian, 29 years old. He ran a logistics company that operated across 3 West African cities, and he had built it himself from the ground up, which meant he was not just a man with money. He was a man with vision and discipline, and the kind of quiet confidence that does not need a room to be looking at it. He dressed simply, he spoke carefully, he listened in a way that made you feel like what you were saying actually mattered to someone in this world. He found me at a product launch event where I was covering a story for my media company. I was standing to the side reviewing my notes when he walked up and said, without any of the performance that men usually brought to these things, "You look like you are trying to solve a problem that keeps changing its mind." I laughed before I could stop myself. We sat down together and spoke for 2 hours while the event continued around us like it was happening in another world. He was sharp, he was funny without trying to be. He asked questions that made me think, not just answer. And when the evening ended and we exchanged numbers, he called me before I even reached my car. He called every night for 2 weeks. Not the shallow kind of calls, the real kind, where you end up talking about your childhood and your fears and the things that keep you awake at night. He told me about losing his father young and how that taught him not to postpone the things that mattered. I told him things I had not said aloud to anyone in years, and each time I hung up, there was a warmth in my chest that I had almost forgotten was possible. For the first time in a very long time, I stopped bracing myself for the ending. I started to believe, cautiously, nervously, like a person learning to walk after a long illness. I started to believe that this one might be different. And then I made the mistake that set everything in motion. I was happy, and I let my friends see it. I did not bring David to meet them. I was not ready for that yet. But I mentioned him at dinner one evening. I described what he did, how we met, how the conversations felt. I could not fully hide the light in my eyes, and I did not try. I watched their faces while I spoke. At the time, I read what I saw as happiness for me. Looking back now, I can see it with perfect clarity. The way Chika's jaw tightened slightly before her smile arrived. The way Tolu became very still. The way still water becomes still just before something moves beneath it. The way Ify lifted her wine glass and sipped and said nothing, her eyes doing a quiet, rapid calculation I could not read. "We are so happy for you, Angela," Tolu said. Her hand reached across the table and covered mine. Her grip was a little too firm. Within 2 weeks of that dinner, the three of them had gone to war. This time, it was not subtle. This time, they did not just plant small seeds in one man's ear. This time, they built an entire architecture of destruction. They reached out through mutual connections and acquaintances in David's circle and began spreading a story, carefully crafted, internally consistent, devastating. That I was a woman with a pattern, that I targeted successful men, that I manufactured emotional intimacy as a strategy, that I was currently involved with multiple men at the same time and had been for years. And then they went further. Ify created a false social media account and spent days constructing fabricated screenshots, carefully edited messages that looked like they had come from me saying cruel things about David to another man. The kind of messages that, if real, would prove everything they were saying about me. Tolu called in a favor from someone who owed her, and that person walked the fake evidence directly into David's circle, into the hands of people he trusted. Ify recorded a voice note, crying, breathless, the voice of a woman who had wrestled with her conscience before finally deciding that truth mattered more than loyalty. She told David she was telling him this because she cared about him as a person and could not watch him get hurt. And then she read him every lie in the gentle, reluctant, heartbroken voice of a devoted friend. David did not call me. He did not text. He did not ask me a single question. He sent 7 words. "I think we should not continue this. Take care." I read those 7 words standing in my kitchen while something on the stove boiled over behind me. I read them twice, 3 times. My mind kept trying to make them mean something different, searching for a translation where they did not mean what they clearly meant. I called him, he did not pick up. I texted, nothing. When I finally reached him 3 days later, his voice was flat and distant, like a door that has already been closed and locked. He said he had heard things, he needed to protect himself. He said he was sorry, and the way he said it made clear that being sorry did not mean he was coming back. I put my phone down on the table, and I sat in my apartment as the light changed outside my window. Afternoon becoming evening, evening becoming night. I could hear children playing in the compound below. I could hear the call to prayer from the mosque down the road. I could hear life, ordinary and indifferent, continuing all around me. And inside me, everything had gone absolutely still. But that was only the beginning. The rumor did not stay in David's circle. It had wings now, and it was just getting started. Within weeks, what had started as a whisper in David's circle had grown into a story that people were telling each other across Lagos. My name was attached to words I had never lived. Manipulative, desperate, unstable, dangerous. People I had not spoken to in years were hearing versions of me that I did not recognize. Colleagues at work began to look at me differently. That particular look where someone is trying to appear normal, but their eyes are doing something cautious and assessing and withdrawn. Invitations stopped coming. Messages went quiet. I would enter a room and feel it, the way the energy shifted, the way conversations adjusted themselves around my presence, the way some people smiled at me too carefully, the way others found a reason to be somewhere else. I was being erased, not with violence or noise, but with whispers and distance, and the slow, suffocating power of a story told about you in rooms where you are not present to defend yourself. My work began to suffer. I could not concentrate, I could not sleep. I stopped eating properly. I stopped calling people because I no longer knew who had heard what, or who believed it, or who was still in my corner and who had quietly stepped out of it. I became a version of myself that I barely recognized, hunched, apologetic, exhausted, afraid of my own shadow. And every single evening, one or all three of my friends called to check on me, to say they had heard the terrible rumors, to say they were furious on my behalf, to say they did not believe a single word, to sit with me on video calls while I cried and hold me in the particular way that only people who know your whole story can hold you. They were masterful. I will give them that. The performance never broke, not once. It was a Thursday night when everything changed. A forgettable Thursday, nothing remarkable about it except that I could not sleep again, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed in the dark with my phone in my hands, scrolling through nothing, trying to outrun my own thoughts. I had borrowed Ife's phone 2 days earlier when mine had died during a meeting, and she had logged into a few things on mine to transfer some files. She had forgotten to log out of her account. And on that unremarkable Thursday night, a notification appeared on my phone from a group chat, one I had never seen before, one I was not a member of. But because Ife was still logged in, I could see it. The group was named simply The Three. My fingers were cold as I opened it. I wish I could tell you that I only skimmed it, that I saw a line or two and closed it, but I did not. I read everything, every message from the very beginning. And what I found in that chat, what those three women had been saying about me for years, in the private language of people who believed they would never be caught, dismantled me in a way I have no language for even now. They had laughed about Emeka. He ran so fast after I spoke to him, Chika wrote. Angela was crying for 2 days straight. I almost felt bad. And then 3 laughing emojis. 3! They had coordinated Segun's exit. I saw the messages where Ife told the other two exactly what she had said to him, using the private thing I had shared with her in tears. And Tolu had responded, "Perfect. That one was getting too serious. We cannot allow it." I saw Tolu's message from the week I had shown up late to a dinner and embarrassed myself in front of a man I was beginning to like. She had sent the wrong time deliberately. I saw her admit it in her own words with a laughing face at the end. I told her 7, the reservation was 8:30. She came in sweating and flustered, and the whole thing fell apart on its own. I saw the conversation about David. I saw where Ife said the fake screenshots had taken her 4 hours to construct. I saw Chika practicing lines for the voice note, sending drafts of what she was going to say, Tolu editing them, making them more convincing, both of them coaching her on exactly how much emotion to put in her voice. I saw the moment Tolu confirmed that her contact had delivered the evidence. I saw all 3 of them celebrating when David sent me those 7 words. "She's done," if he had written. He was the last one who would have taken her seriously. She's going to be alone forever, and she will never even know why. And beneath that message, 2 blue ticks. Read, received, celebrated. I put the phone down on my bed. I looked at the ceiling for a long time. There was no dramatic breakdown, no screaming, no shaking. Something inside me that had been cracked for years simply finished breaking. And then in the strange quiet that followed, something else happened. Something I did not expect. I became still. Not the stillness of defeat, the stillness of a woman who has finally seen the full picture, who has looked at the entire thing without flinching and understood at last that she was never the problem, that the years of self-doubt and self-shrinking and questioning the woman in the mirror had been built entirely on a foundation of lies constructed by the people she loved most. I did not reply the group chat. I did not confront any of them. I did not send a long message full of pain and scripture and things people say when they want to wound and be seen wounding at the same time. I simply, quietly, with the kind of precision that only absolute clarity can give you, blocked all three of them everywhere, without a word, without a goodbye, without giving them the satisfaction that I had seen it. They had taken years from me. I was not going to give them a single moment more. They thought they had buried me. They did not know they had just planted me. And what was about to grow would be more than any of them could bear to witness. If this story is pulling something out of you, if you have ever been betrayed by someone you called a friend, subscribe to this channel right now. I grieved. I will not pretend that I did not. I grieved the friendships I thought I had. I grieved the years I had spent doubting myself. All those mornings I had stood in front of the mirror and looked for the flaw. All those times I had made myself smaller so that I would stop losing things, not knowing I was losing myself, and they were the reason for all of it. I grieved the time. You cannot get years back. I knew that, and the knowing was its own particular kind of ache. But grief has a bottom. You fall, and then your feet touch something solid, and from that solid place, you make a choice. I made mine. I decided that everything they had tried to take from me, I was going to build back, and I was going to build it so high that they would have to look up to see it. I started with my work. I threw myself into my career the way a person throws themselves into water after a long time in the desert, desperately, gratefully, completely. I pitched stories I had been afraid to pitch. I took risks I had been second-guessing for years. I started a digital content platform on the side, documenting African professional women and their stories. And the response that came back told me that I had been carrying a gift that had been waiting quietly and patiently for me to stop apologizing for it and simply use it. I went to therapy, a serious, honest, twice-a-week kind of therapy where I sat across from a woman who helped me excavate everything, the self-doubt, the patterns, the years of believing I was too much or not enough, and we looked at all of it together and named it for what it was, not a character flaw, a wound. And wounds, given the right conditions, heal. I built my body back. I started running in the mornings, the kind of long, early morning runs where the streets are still quiet and the air is cool and your thoughts slowly stop fighting you and start walking beside you instead. I started cooking real food again. I started sleeping. I started slowly and deliberately inhabiting myself again. And I rebuilt my social world. Carefully this time, with the kind of discernment that betrayal teaches you whether you want the lesson or not. I found women who celebrated without calculation, women who told you the truth even when it was uncomfortable, women who did not need you to be smaller so that they could feel larger. That kind of friendship I discovered is not common, but it exists. And when you find it, it is nothing like what I had before. It is something better, something real. David, I heard, through someone who knew, had eventually found out what happened. He had been approached by one of the people who had been involved in spreading the story, and that person, Conscience finally finding them months later, had told him the truth. I was told he tried to reach me. I was told he wanted to explain and apologize. I did not call him back, not because I was bitter, but because I had learned something important in the silence after that group chat. I did not need a man to validate what those women had tried to take from me. I needed to validate it myself, and I was doing exactly that one day at a time. Within 18 months, my platform had 40,000 followers. Within 2 years, I was being invited to speak at professional conferences. Within 3 years, I had signed a consulting partnership with a media group that paid me more in 1 month than I had earned in a full year at my old job. I moved apartments, not running, but rising. I wore my own name comfortably again. I walked into rooms and I did not brace myself. I did not rehearse. I did not shrink. I simply walked in. And what of Chika, Tolu, and Ife? You cannot build a friendship on the destruction of someone else. That is not a foundation, it is a fault line. And when the thing you are all united against is removed, the fault line opens. The moment I left, the architecture collapsed. Without me as their common project, the three of them had nothing to hold them together except the truth of who they each were. And who they each were was three women who were willing to destroy a friend to get ahead. That nature does not stay contained to one target. It spreads. Chika made a move on a man that Ife had been quietly pursuing. Ife found out. The message she sent Chika in response, I was told about it later by someone who witnessed it, contained everything, every private thing Chika had ever shared, weaponized and launched back with full force. Chika responded in kind. And Tolu, trying to position herself in the fallout, made the mistake of telling both of them different versions of a story, and when those versions compared, they both turned on her. The same tools they had used on me, the whispers, the planted stories, the constructed evidence, the careful character assassinations, they began to use on one another, freely, without restraint. And because each of them knew the playbook intimately, they each knew exactly how to land every blow. The man that Chika had flirted her way into, using tactics perfected on my connections, eventually heard from mutual people what kind of woman she was. He was gone within months. The man Ife had been constructing a careful web around discovered the false persona she presented and pulled away publicly in a way that humiliated her in their social circle. Tolu lost a professional opportunity because the person she had tried to manipulate was also someone who had also once been close to Chika, and Chika, by then burning with rage, told them everything. Their group chat, the one they had used to coordinate years of cruelty against me, became the place where they turned all of that cruelty on one another. I was not watching. I was not interested. I had long since stepped out of that particular darkness and into my own light. But the world is not large, and Lagos is smaller than it appears, and word travels on the wings of consequence whether you are paying attention or not. The last thing I heard, Chika was alone, her reputation worn thin, cycling through friendships that never lasted more than a season. Ife had relocated, quietly without announcement, to another city, starting over in a place where nobody knew the version of her that had been exposed, and Tolu, calculated, precise, chess-playing Tolu, had been outplayed by her own game. Someone she had manipulated documented everything and made it known to the exact people whose opinion mattered most to her ambitions. She was still recovering from the damage. They had wanted my life. They had envied my connections, my grace, the way I moved through the world without trying. They had spent years dismantling what they could not build for themselves. And in the end, all they had dismantled was each other. Tolu, Chika, and Ife did not lose everything because I prayed for their suffering or because the universe owed me a scoreboard. They lost because destruction is not a sustainable way to live, because you cannot practice cruelty on the people you call friends and then be surprised when that cruelty comes home to roost, because jealousy, left unchecked, eventually consumes the one carrying it. And I did not rise because I am special or lucky or because life finally decided to be fair to me. I rose because I refused to let what they did write the final chapter of my story. If you are sitting somewhere right now and you recognize yourself in Angela's story, if you have lost good things and spent years blaming yourself for losses that were actually manufactured against you, I want you to hear this clearly. The fact that someone had to secretly destroy your opportunities to keep up with you is the most powerful evidence that you are always more than enough. You do not shrink a tree because it is growing too tall. You only try to cut it down if it is the tallest thing in the field. They saw something in you that you had not yet fully seen in yourself. That is the real story, and it doesn't end with their chapter. It ends with yours. Pay attention to who is genuinely happy when something good happens to you. Watch whether the people calling themselves your friends celebrate your wins or subtly diminish them. Notice who is present in your pain but quiet during your progress. These details matter. Your circle determines so much more than people admit. If this story moved you, subscribe right now, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling us, have you ever been betrayed by someone you called a friend?